the way that Watertight kind of teaches and the process that we take people through is that it's founded on decency. It's founded on respect. I truly believe that good marketing takes somebody through to a buying decision with which they remain happy, even if that's not to buy from you. Essentially, marketing is how you treat people. That is what it is. It's how you treat people. And I believe that treating people decently is a business strategy.
So you're a smart business committed to innovation, to service and to modern marketing. And you're asking, what's next? Wondering how you can become even more innovative. My name is Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and this is the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we share all kinds of tips, advice and interview guests on all things innovation and leadership in modern marketing. Hi there, innovator. It's great to be back with another episode. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. I trust too that you enjoyed my conversations with Andrew Michael of Hotjar and of Churn FM, and also with Emanuela Grace of Find Your Voice. Now today, I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest, Bryony Thomas of Watertight Marketing. Bryony is an inspirational marketing speaker. She's also author of the book Watertight Marketing, which has been variously described as a must for small business and as the entrepreneur's essential marketing manual. Through her book, her speaking, her events, and her hands-on support, Bryony gives entrepreneurs and business leaders the clarity, the confidence, and the structure to transform their marketing to put their business on a sustainable growth curve. Today's episode is brought to you by the Transformational Marketing Hub, where you'll find a host of free and exceptionally useful information to help you transform your marketing. You can access the Transformational Marketing Hub by visiting innovabizz.co/VIP. Go check it out now. It's free to join. You know you want to. And if you're already a member, all you need to do is log in and you'll find your resources there. In our discussion today, Bryony talked to me about how the standard old marketing funnel has outlived its usefulness as a metaphor and what she has as a better metaphor. She outlined her profit purpose matrix, which is a great adjunct to the ideal client exercise. And also we talked about taking a long-term view of marketing from a customer-first perspective, which in my view is the only way to do good marketing in the service of your customer. Without further ado then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Bryony Thomas. Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today, all the way from Bristol in the UK, Bryony Thomas, who is the founder of Watertight Marketing, and she's the author of the book with the same title. Welcome to the podcast, Bryony. It's a great privilege to have you as my guest.
Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to it.
Now, Dominic Dolan, who's one of my clients, actually made me aware of you and your work and suggested that we reach out and have a chat to you. So big hello to Dominic.
Absolutely, and from me.
Yeah. Now, Bryony, your Watertight marketing system walks people through an end-to-end process that involves every step of the buying journey. And it also looks at the sales and marketing activities from the point of view of the customer, which I think is really the only way to look at marketing, but a lot of people don't do it that way. Now, you also replace the good old sales funnel, which I think is a little bit worn these days. And your metaphor is one of a bucket and funnels and taps as a combination. So as someone who's a little tired of that traditional old sales funnel model, I'm really looking forward to exploring your system in more depth today. But before we start talking about all things marketing and buckets and funnels and taps, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get to where you are today, and what were some of the pivotal moments in that journey?
Well, I often get asked about my background, and I'm never entirely sure quite how far back to go. But I think the thing that people often find quite interesting about me is actually my early years. So I spent my infancy living in a hippie commune on the hills of West Wales. And so I often describe my entrepreneurial journey as a bit of a curious rebellion.
Okay.
There was almost nothing further than my childhood than running a business and working with other people who run businesses. I went to university to be Prime Minister. I studied politics, and depending on when this goes out, we'll see who our Prime Minister is going to be here in the UK. But what I found was that marketing was essentially the best bits of everybody else's jobs. It has psychology, and it has art, and it has creativity, and it has statistics, and it has science, and it has psychology. It essentially has a bit of everything. And so although I did start in marketing accidentally through funding my studies, funding my first degree, it's definitely a job that I fell into and found that I loved.
Mm. And so when did you start your own consultancy?
So I started in 2008, having spent 12 years prior to that in marketing. And my job most immediately before setting up on my own was Director of Marketing for Experian Marketing Services here in the UK. And so it was a big change to go from a big corporate role into running my own small business. And at the time, my husband wasn't working, so had a burning platform on which to make it work. And I'm sure anyone who's set up their own business will know the challenges of setting it up and getting it running and having enough steady income coming in to feel confident.
Mm. One of the things you talk about in your marketing model is overcoming the peaks and the troughs, which the yo-yo effect that I'm sure all businesses would be very familiar with, and particularly in the very early days when you're kind of on your own and you do a bit of marketing, you might get a project or two and then you stop marketing because you're busy fulfilling the needs of the project and delivering on the project. And then once the project is over, you're suddenly in a trough again because you haven't done the marketing to continue. So talk to us a little bit then about that system and why. I guess I'm interested in why you've kind of say in your book, for example, sales funnels don't exist, and how you kind of came to the conclusion that there was a better way of looking at the whole marketing metaphor of the funnel and the system.
Yeah, well, I kind of think in metaphor, and I always have written in metaphor and analogy. And I think the sales funnel is absolutely ubiquitous. So if you do an image search for sales funnel, it's something like 33.5 million images that you get, and they're all in primary colours. I obviously didn't get that memo, but the point really about the word funnel and what the diagram represents is that they are opposing. What the word funnel and what the diagram represents are the opposite of one another. So a funnel in your kitchen, so if you put water in the top, all of it is going to come out at the bottom, whereas a sales funnel diagram actually shows a reducing number of people at each stage in the process, which therefore, if you were going to choose a kitchen utensil, you'd be better off with a colander to represent that model, or a sieve. And so because I feel that language is extremely important, the more you use a word, the more you believe that the thing exists. And this is proven in anthropology and all sorts of psychological study, that language is really important to the way that we navigate the world. And so I truly believe that if you continue to use the word sales funnel as if a funnel exists, it fundamentally undermines the way that people actually address the process. And if you accept that it's an awful, awful metaphor, I mean, it's a nice diagram, but an awful metaphor, then it kind of forces the issue that you need to change the metaphor within a business to start thinking about things differently. And so the buckets, funnels, taps, I've been using that as a way of describing how marketing works back into my corporate days. So when I used to present to the board what we were doing, I was always very keen to make sure that people understood where the activities we were putting together had an impact. And so started to really dissect the funnel at that stage. And if you have a bucket at the bottom, then you move up and you've got kind of funnels and filters. I use the phrase funnels and filters. And then at the top you have taps. What that does is it turns it upside down. It necessarily means you have to start at the bottom. And that's often the opposite way around to most people approach marketing, because they think there's a funnel. And so they say to marketing, will you just fill the funnel? And say, well, I would, but you don't have one.
Yeah, I love it. And to me, the whole idea of having a funnel that, you get, the concept of the funnel is you get lots of leads that are remotely interested in what you have to offer, and you kind of feed them into the funnel. And along the way through that funnel, a lot of those leads turn out to either not be exactly the ideal customer. Yeah, well, they step out because for some reason. Either they're not the right customer, or it's not the right time for them, or whatever. They don't like you, and at some point, there's a small number comes through the bottom. But to me, it ignores the whole idea of marketing being a journey, and the whole buyer's experience is a journey, and then the other part of it is kind of once people come through the funnel, it's there seems to be this idea of, okay, marketing's done now. But as you point out in your book, it's kind of marketing as a way of thinking. It's not something that has a start and an end point.
No, when we go into businesses, so if we go into large businesses to do a transformation program, one of the key aims that we have is to give the organization a journey brain. We use the phrase a journey brain, where people can understand where it fits in the journey. Because the things I'd pick up on in what you said there is that the whole premise that marketing is about filling the funnel, to my mind, is really wasteful. And if you start from the bottom up, so if you create a bucket, a proposition that holds water, that is compelling and means that people want to stay there and refer it on to others, then that means that you need to convert fewer. If your conversion tools are highly effective, then that means that you need to attract fewer. And so actually, if you do it the other way up, which is to actually, when you get to awareness, be quite focused about who you want to talk to, you end up having to talk to fewer people to get more out at the bottom. And so once you turn it upside down and you go through your marketing, improving the touch points at each stage bottom up, it means that by the time you get to what most people think of as marketing, there's much less to do. And you find that the activities at that top end, what I call taps or awareness and interest, lead generation, tends to be the really expensive stuff. And so again, if you turn it upside down, it's a bit like compound interest, because everything that then passes through it is better. It converts better, and so you need to spend less because you're speaking to the right people and the conversion is higher.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it, and I like the idea that you focus then on the bucket as this is what your offer is, and you focus on leaks in the bucket. And I was reminded of the song there from back in my
There's
years.
a hole in your bucket.
That's it. Yeah, that's dating me a little bit. But, you talk about forgotten customers and poor onboarding experiences and no emotional connection. And, there's probably a whole lot of other things that represent the hole in that bucket. But it's a good kind of metaphor to say, well, if you get the fundamentals right there, then it means that the people that are coming into that stage are probably going to be having the best experience they can, and like you say, the referrals will come as well.
Yeah, they tend to stay longer, spend more, and tell more people. And the key thing about the touchpoint leaks in the bucket that I talk about in Watertight Marketing is that there are 3 areas where somebody with the job title marketing, or someone who's experienced in marketing, would be able to do a project for you that would mean that every customer that moves through that journey picks up goodwill, essentially. Because the other point I would make about the traditional funnel is that it's a volume game, and it assumes that your interactions with customers who don't go on to buy are worthless. They're expendable, they're disposable, and so they were never going to buy from you, so chuck them out. And I just find that whole premise, quite frankly, A, disrespectful, and B, wasteful, because and long-term damaging. Because if you consider that every interaction that you have with any human, whether they go on to buy from you or not, leaves an impression, then surely you want to be speaking to as few people as possible and having as big a positive impact as possible. And so the whole idea of the funnel as a volume game, I find deeply, deeply wasteful and damaging to long-term business success.
Yeah, and that's where I really struggle with the idea of the funnel as well, because if you kind of spend any time on social media or even just go into your email every day, there's just so much noise and garbage in there that people are sending because they're playing that numbers game. They're kind of spraying information out into the world as widely as they can to try and capture as many eyes on whatever it is they have to offer that are unlikely to be interested because they're not targeted. So
no, but it's also interesting to think of the impact that you have on the people who then become disinterested, because I know one can purchase funnel email campaigns, for example, that do the welcome sequence or indoctrination, I think is the word, which again is a really disrespectful word. It's a disgusting word when you think that's it, wider context.
Kind of like brainwashing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, if you look at lots of language in marketing, it's pretty disgusting when it comes to actually how we deal with people. But things like the indoctrination email sequences that one can buy from funnel builders, they actually increase in their irritation and anger. So if you look at the way that they actually structure those email sequences, they're actually designed to irritate the heck out of people. And personally, whilst I can understand that you want to keep your list full of people who are eventually going to buy, I think that winding people up to the point where they leave probably isn't the best long-term strategy. Short-term, I understand, and I understand why these manipulative techniques are used. But I think for long-term sustainable success in a business where you're able to look yourself in the mirror and people truly want to work there, it wouldn't be my plan.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. I always have to laugh at, there's either emails that, you might be the second or third email that you get, or it might be a landing page that says, here's the upsell offer. And yes, please give me the upsell, or no, thanks, I don't actually want to be a better person or a better business or have more money in the bank or whatever it might be that they're touting. So it is, like you say, a little bit, a lot disrespectful.
And I find it really interesting that marketing's gone that way, and maybe it's a sign of kind of increasing desperation in a very saturated market and commoditized market and all of those things, or it's a symptomatic of the fact that these technologies are widely available and can be used for good and evil. It's not the system's fault, is it? What people put into it, but I find that it's the distance. It's a bit like trolling. So I think there's a distance issue here. There's a proximity issue. So I don't think there are very many salespeople, for example, these days, who would sit in a sales meeting and use those sorts of manipulative techniques when they're looking somebody in the eye. And yet somehow the distance of digital marketing in particular leads people to put together techniques and programs which, quite frankly, they must know, they do know, make them feel a little bit icky.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really, that gets my goat up, and I'm really passionate about bringing, the digital marketing space back into that realm of, yes, we have these digital tools, and yes, there is the potential for making things easier and quicker to do. But at the end of the day, people do business with people, and it's the human relationships that are fundamental and important to marketing. And you mentioned at the beginning, that you were attracted to marketing because it involved so many different things. And I think the human relationships part of it is a really critical one. And unless you build those relationships, I mean, if you went into a physical store, a physical location to buy something or to look around for something, and you were treated the way you are treated by some people online, you'd probably just turn right around and tell them to stick whatever it is that they've got where it doesn't fit.
Absolutely. And I do hope that it will come full circle. I do hope that some of these things will fall away. But one of the things that we've found with people who do the Watertight Marketing program is that they've looked at lots of these things and ended up not doing them because they couldn't look themselves in the mirror whilst doing so. And what they've found with the way that Watertight kind of teaches and the process that we take people through is that it's founded on decency, it's founded on respect, and that I truly believe that good marketing takes somebody through to a buying decision with which they remain happy, even if that's not to buy from you. And essentially marketing is how you treat people. That is what it is. It's how you treat people. And I believe that treating people decently is a business strategy.
Yeah, I agree entirely with that. One of the things that you start off with, and that's really, for me, is a core to marketing, because I do a lot of work in this area, and that's defining the ideal client, really getting clear about who your ideal client is, what their needs are, where they intersect with your expertise or products or services, and how you can then get a message out to them that actually is of value to them right from the get-go. So talk to us a little bit about your approach to the ideal client and how that fits in with the taps, buckets, buckets, funnels and taps metaphor.
So I think there are two key approaches to this. So the first is a series of questioning. In fact, I have the second edition of Watertight Marketing coming out early 2020, and this is an area that's really expanded. In fact, it's probably the largest change in the book. So early on in the book, I talk about the buying continuum. So from if you draw a line in your mind, on the left-hand side, you have an impulse purchase. On the right-hand side, you have a considered purchase. So an impulse purchase might be in a business-to-business context. Perhaps that's restocking the stationery cupboard. In a consumer context, that's restocking the toilet paper. And then if you go over to the right-hand side, a considered purchase, in a consumer context, maybe that's buying a house or getting a mortgage. In a business-to-business context, that might be recruiting a key member of staff or a multi-million-pound software implementation. So if you think about this line from left to right, from purchases that are made in a heartbeat to purchases that are made through, quite frankly, a bit of a merry dance, the further it is to the right, the more moments of pause there are in a journey. So the more you slow yourself down, the more you consider, the more you consult. And the further you are to the right, the more the Watertight marketing model really comes into play, because I believe that there are certain bases that come together to move something right on that line of consideration. And those there are typical ones, and then each organisation then has a few others. So you've got the financial burden and financial complexity. So there's the finance. Is it simple and is it relatively cheap for you, or is it financially complex and financially problematic? There's then time. So is it something where you can get the benefit quickly, or is it something where the benefit is going to take time to emerge? Then there's a number of people involved in the purchase decision. So is this something you buy for yourself and quite frankly you don't care what anybody thinks? Or is it a decision that means you're going to be judged by people who matter? Then there's functional complexity. Over on the left, simple to understand, I get how it works, intuitive. Over on the right, functionally complex, difficult to get my head around, outside my area of knowledge. And then that comes together into what I would call emotional weight. So on the left-hand side of that impulse purchase, it's emotionally light, and it can be fizzy, it can be happy, like I had to have it, I just saw it and I had to have it, or it's deeply dull, which is I'm going to restock the toilet paper. Whereas on the other side, it's emotionally heavy, and again, it can be positive. Wow, I'm choosing my wedding dress, the most exciting dress I've ever bought in my life, but I'm going to have to live with those photos for the rest of my life. Or it can be heavy, as in it's a massive game-changing decision for your business. So it emotionally has some weight to it. So the more you put those things together, you see what lands it on the right of that line. And the further it is to the right, the slower somebody goes. Now, my point with marketing is that marketing usually is there in a considered purchase to slow things down. And this is anathema to most salespeople. You know, they think their job is to put a cattle prod behind someone and rush them down that purchase path. Whereas I believe that really good marketing creates moments for purposeful pause where someone stops, thinks, and actively chooses to move forward. Now, good marketing means that the salesperson can be one step ahead with an outstretched arm inviting somebody forward. Bad marketing means that the salesperson feels like they have to stand behind them and push them. So
Yeah,
I talk about this continuum, and it can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy, and also, you know, it highlights that there is a big difference between selling or marketing something that is a commodity and is kind of a really quick decision, and a no-brainer. You need the toilet paper or you need the stationery cupboard restocked, so it's really just a matter of what paper am I going to get, as opposed to the big purchase, which, you know, there's several options, and one of the options is not to buy it at all, and the other option is there's, you know, 3 variants here from different suppliers. They might all be quite different in some sense, but they are options to address the problem. And so I think from my point of view, the job of marketing is really to educate that particular customer about, you know, what it is that your product or your service can do for them, without pushing them, as you say, with the sales.
Absolutely. It's an invitation. And so where that comes to the ideal customer, which is the question you asked me, you know, I think there's lots of value to be gained from the persona mapping, that, you know, Google it, avatars and personas, there are thousands of techniques for doing that. And they're useful, but I think actually the attitude to each of those areas that I've outlined, and often in some organizations there are a couple of other continuums as well to add in that particular context. So for me, it's more important to understand the attitude and the psychology along those buying bases, because it helps me to understand how they're likely to move through the journey, and how much education they might need to feel that they've given that due consideration and can make a good decision. So that's the kind of customer view version. But there's also a new model that's it's a sentence in the current book. So in the current book, I talk about balancing pride and profit. And that's now become a key area of focus and its own model. And if you imagine, so I call it the profit purpose matrix. And this is where you then reverse it. So rather than looking through the eyes of your customer, you now look through the eyes of your business. And I get people to map purpose, kind of high, low. Low is, quite frankly, this stuff bores me, and it's like pulling teeth. Whereas up at the high purpose, this is really exciting. I'd do it for free. I smile when I think about it. And then if you think about profit on the other matrix, on the other axis, low profit. So, it's high cost of serve, or people won't pay very much for it. High profit, I can serve this in the way that works for me, and people can pay well for it. That then creates you a nice little matrix where you can understand the sorts of business you should just say no to. So if it doesn't light your fire and it makes you no money, that is a no. And it has to be a no from day one. And I think I have a whole, it'll probably become its own book, to be honest. I have a whole series of things around this matrix and how to use it. But one of the things I say to people early in business is to be really confident about saying no from the outset, because often you get slowed down by taking on the work that's easy to win, and then you realize it's easy to win because you don't want it.
Yeah.
So see it from those two angles, and when you smush those two frameworks together, you can get to a really good perspective on what's going to work for your customers and what's going to work for you in the long term in maintaining your energy as well as your bank balance.
Yeah, well, that's a fascinating way to look at that. And, I imagine, like many others, I've, taken on board things that were, for me, didn't really light my fire, and also were kind of probably not profitable from the point of view of the amount of time and energy I had to spend on it to actually deliver the service that I was paid for. So, and you become a bit resentful after a while of those things as well. So you kind of get into this rut where, your business is actually, you kind of don't like your business. You're
It
resentful.
degrades your energy and your passion for doing it. So, which is why. So, I talk about there being a line of visibility. So, below, kind of on this matrix, if it's kind of below the line of profitability and purpose, so it's on the bottom half of that matrix, I call that as being below the line of visibility, which is to say that you're not always going to say no. Sometimes, for whatever reason, you've got to pay the mortgage. I understand that non-ideal customers happen, or someone who was ideal then falls below the line in some way. The key thing from a marketing perspective is ideally you would create marketing tools that filter those people out. So that's why filters are as important as funnels. But if you do have them on your books, what you don't do is talk about them. You don't case study them. You don't put that service on your website. You don't talk about it with friends. So what is below the line of visibility stays below the line of visibility because you don't want to attract more of it.
That's right. Yeah.
So often when we've done an ideal client piece and we've done these both angles, one of the things we do is we do quite a lot of pruning in terms of the marketing materials that people are putting out into the world so that they stop attracting the sorts of people that, quite frankly, aren't doing them any favours.
Yeah, and I think that's where, a really good ideal client exercise is really valuable, and combined with, looking at it from an internal business perspective with this profit purpose matrix is a really good addition to that, I think.
It works really well, and I think it helps people to understand often the journey they've all previously been on. So one of the things I would also say is sometimes you do have to go through those steps in order to fill the edges. So in order to know what a no is, sometimes you have to have experienced it. And so often when I go through this process, we'll have businesses in the room who might be, 3 years down, and they go, oh yeah, I did that, yeah. Oh yeah, and then I did that, and you go, well, of course you did, because everybody does to a greater or lesser extent. And so to a certain extent, you have to move through the stages in order to feel the edges, in order to define these things for yourself. And so often startups really struggle, excuse me, startups really struggle with this exercise because they have no idea what their ideal customer is because they haven't yet experienced it. And so I believe that in a business journey, you can have a good stab at it at the outset, but somewhere between 18 months to 3 months in, or a level of business maturity, it needs to be redone. And it needs to be redone regularly so that you can bring in your new learnings. So what used to be too expensive to serve last year might no longer be because of a technical change, or what lit your fire last year really might have fallen off trend. So it needs to be iterative, and it needs to be built into your annual planning.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because, like you said earlier, the marketing is never finished. It's kind of an ongoing journey. And the ideal client for me is one thing that does iterate as we move forward. And often a business will come up with new innovative ideas or new products or new services that, might meet a different need than their current ideal client. So they've got to keep refreshing that exercise.
Absolutely. And I'd say, technology really does speak to this. So we, over the last several years, have struggled to profitably serve micro businesses mainly because of my personality, that if a business passes through my consciousness, I'll give them my energy. But so we've had to create systems that mean that those people can be served without so much of my energetic involvement. And so what we've done is to take some of the things that were previously being delivered as live programs. So I was obviously then meeting them and understanding their businesses. And the moment I hear about someone's business, essentially I'm in. And that's my issue, but it is my issue. And so we've had to structurally build systems that allow people to consume our content without my energetic involvement. Now, technically, a couple of years ago, that would have been pretty tough. But now with online learning platforms, with some nice engagement tools, with moderation tools, that can be much more easily done. And so what a couple of years ago for us was quite problematic as a client group from a cost to serve perspective, not purpose, not desire, has changed because the technologies have allowed us to give them value without it killing me, to be honest.
Yeah, I love the model you've put together for the Watertight Marketing book and building essentially an online course that comes as part of the book with that, and walking people through that, which I guess is one of those platforms that is available for people that are smaller businesses, so they can read the book, but they then work through your program together with the book to actually implement the teachings in the book, which I think is a really great way to do that, because there's so many great books out there and people kind of read them and maybe get halfway through and put them aside and lose interest in them, even though there's absolute gold in them. And I think that's a great model to actually increase the value of that information in the book.
Yeah, and that came from our readers. So when the book first came out in 2013, what happened was that people would register their book and they would get an extensive set of workbooks. When I say extensive, it's about 400 pages. And what we've found in talking to people is, for some people that was just manna from heaven, and they were in their element and loved it. And for other people, it stopped them in their tracks because, quite frankly, it was just overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so, issue of our own here on the leak number 2, poor onboarding, we were slapping people in the face with this massive task. And so through then taking that and turning it into programs, as you say, we have a platform called Watertight Web School that has 650 videos. We don't expect anyone to watch them all. You determine which ones work for you. Once people have been through that, and I've chatted to them and said, well, what meant that you made it through? What was it that kept you going? Why did you plow on through? And a number of them just talked to me about how they read the book. And the key thing was the kind of holiday read, the kind of read it through cover to cover first without picking up a pen, and then coming back to it and doing it in bits. So essentially the course you're talking about, which is the How to Get the Most from Your Book course, is a collection of all the tips and hints from readers who've had the most success. And it was amazing to me to hear how people approach my material, because obviously I come at it from a very different angle, don't I? It's kind of second nature to me. And it was really interesting to see how people have broken down the material, how they'd approached it, how they'd organised their filing, how they'd described it to other people when they were working within a larger team. And it was only really from listening to readers that course was put together.
Okay. That's fascinating. Well, I've looked at the course. I've done the holiday read, but that's about where I'm at right now. So I need to set aside the time to work on the book.
Yes,
to learn more. But yeah, I just like, because I've read a couple of books recently where I've actually done that without thinking about it. I've kind of read them through and so this is really great stuff, and probably put a few post-it notes and highlighter pens in various places and thought I'll come back to that. And then once I'd finished the book, came back and really read it in detail and sat down and actually made notes and implemented things that were recommendations out of the book. So I think the idea of doing that actually gives you a lot more value from the book. So I love that you've kind of actually prepared a course that walks people through that experience after they've read the book.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, interestingly, is that so there are a few things that were happening. Is that often people would start implementing as they were reading, which meant they'd get distracted by the first idea rather than the best idea. And then the other thing that tended to happen is that people would try and do everything. So if you were to do everything in the Watertight Marketing book, so we work with businesses at about £2 to £20 million turnover, so pounds sterling. So some of those teams are 2 people, some of those teams are 100 people. And if you were to try to do everything, you would need 100 people and you'd need maybe 2 years. So picking and choosing a few bits is absolutely right on your first pass. I think the record, so from what I'm aware of in terms of our web school participation, we have one individual who has been through that process 27 times. My understanding is that she does it each time she launches a new product or is promoting a new event. So she uses it as a series of checklists rather than as, oh, tick, done, because it's a process. So you often come back and repeat, and we have a few people who just do it annually as a refresh of their marketing strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I love about, these things, that it is a process and it is a journey, and a journey that kind of, parallels the buying journey of the client, so that it does need to kind of act as a guide for everything you're doing as you go forward.
Yeah, and I think it's a tip that goes across all business books, doesn't it? So I think if it's a book that really spoke to you, then I would suggest that it probably needs reading a few times and in a few different states. So there's that holiday read state, which is quite passive and it's lighter, isn't it? And I think I say that gives you the picture on the front of the box. So if you're doing a jigsaw, you look at the picture on the front of the box, and the holiday read gives you that. And then you come back to it and read it more deeply and find how all those bits fit together.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, the jigsaw. And then you start implementing by building a system. So my system was always find the corner pieces first and then do the outline, because you always have one straight edge. And
exactly.
Then you start working inwards and complete the picture. So having a strategy to do it bit by bit, yeah.
And that's why having thinking tools, having frameworks and models, it's a bit like finding the corners and the edges. It helps people to understand what's going on. And often, particularly creative people, resist structured thinking processes. But I truly believe that structure sets you free. So I think it is where creativity happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, structure sets you free. That's a really good way to put it. All right. Well, I could go on talking about metaphors and structure and marketing and ideal client and buckets and funnels and taps for ages, but I'm aware of the time now. So I think it's a good time right now to move on to our innovation round, and it's designed to help our audience, who are primarily innovators and leaders in their field, with some tips from your experience. So I've got 5 questions, and hopefully you'll give us some really insightful answers that'll inspire people to go and do something awesome today.
Okay.
So what do you think is the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Get some really good structured thinking tools and models that help you to organize your thoughts. And they're often angles and lenses that allow you to just kind of spray your thoughts out into a structure and see how it all fits together.
Great advice. And I was reminded of that today. I'm a big fan of mind mapping, and I was going back to a mind mapping program that I hadn't used for a little while to outline a presentation that I'm preparing in a couple of weeks' time. And within about 20 minutes, I had the whole presentation done, more or less, except for the slides that go with it. But it was all done because I had that structure, and I had a templated structure around how I structure my presentations as well. So it really is very powerful, time saving, and also it does help.
Well, I think we'd be mad to start with a blank sheet of paper. I mean, how many years of evolution and thinking exist in the world that mean that there are structures that help us think? I think would be, it's really naive and a little bit arrogant to think that starting with a blank sheet of paper will get you where you need to be better or faster.
All right. Now, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
So I'd say there are 2 things, but they're interlinked. I know you've said ask for one, but I'll just ignore that and tell you 2.
Yeah.
So the first would be writing the book. So writing the book fundamentally strengthened the theory. The great thing about writing a book is you need to do a coherent narrative. You're forced to look at the way that things interlink, and you're specifically forced to sequence things such that the learning and the process layers. So I think the process of writing a book will, particularly for anybody who consults, anybody who takes people on a journey of any kind, writing a book of how you do that will make your process eminently stronger. And then the thing I would layer on that is speaking. So since the book came out in 2013, I would estimate that I've described the Watertight Marketing methodology to a greater or lesser extent to around 15 to 20,000 people. And in doing that, the way that I describe it has morphed, it's changed, it's improved, because I can now, in a way that writing a book doesn't, when I'm describing it on stage, I can see what lands, I can see how the audience responds. And so now in having written the second edition, although I'm explaining the same things, I'm explaining them in ways that I know land because I've seen people respond. So write a book and talk about it.
Yeah, that's a great advice. And I like the idea that, developing the sequence and the structure and how, forcing you to explain it in a way that people understand and people respond to. So really
sequencing, I'd say, is really underrated as a massive strategic differentiator. And it's, I would say it's one of the key differences with Watertight Marketing to other tools, is that the sequencing is absolutely critical to its effect and the impact that it has.
All right. Is there a favorite resource that you use most often?
So I'm gonna give you a slightly odd answer to this and say Post-it note.
Post-it note, yeah. And
a very large wall. That's it.
Okay, well, so why is that then?
Well, because it goes back to the jigsaw box analogy, doesn't it? So if I've got a thinking tool of some kind, so a framework or a model, you can throw that up onto the wall quite quickly. You can splurge up your thoughts. You can move them around. You can do it with a team. These days, obviously, you can photograph it or replicate it in one of the kind of Trello type systems. But essentially, for me, really good mapping of any thinking process starts with a large wall and Post-it notes. And it's the fact that you can move them around and literally see your thinking on a big space.
I think Post-it notes are one of the most underrated inventions of all time, actually.
Well, I don't know a consultant who wouldn't agree with us, Jürgen. I think anyone who does big thinking needs big walls and lots of notes.
Yeah. I mean, I love the whiteboards in my office, but I've also got lots of Post-it notes. And if I'm running workshops, I try to get as many different coloured and shaped Post-it notes as we can to make use of as well.
Well, and that's the lovely thing. So I'm a big fan of a whiteboard wall as well. But what I find myself doing is sticking Post-it notes on them, because the problem with writing on the whiteboard wall is you can't then pick up what you've
written. That's right. Yeah. All right. Now, what's the best way you think to keep a project or a client on track when you're moving them through Watertight Marketing, for example?
Yeah, there are a few different strands to this. So for me, particularly with a marketing transformation, which is what we do with our larger clients, it's having the MD or the chief exec fully on board with the project, and also making sure that there's a core set of learning that goes through the whole business, and then deeper bits that are done by the specialists. So where a Watertight Marketing project will fail is where it's tried to be done in a corner or in a marketing team where they haven't got the MD involved and salespeople think it's a marketing project. The ones that succeed have the MD who has probably usually seen me speak, read the book a couple of times, and is a real convert, a real enthusiast. And they will invest in like a kick-off day for the whole organization, which at least allows me to get them to buckets, funnels, taps. So if I can just get the whole organization understanding buckets, funnels, taps, those who are put together in what we call plumbing teams to go deeper into the Watertight Marketing methodology can then at least have a confident conversation that people can understand where to plug it in their head. So I'd say a core common language, senior support, and making sure that the whole team has that broad jigsaw box view of what's going on.
Yeah, great advice. All right. What's the number one thing you think anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
be a decent human.
That's a bit sad, actually, that answer.
I know, isn't it?
Mm.
But I think one of the things, a lens that I would love anyone to apply to any decision they make for their business is, would they write it on a billboard, on a kind of clapperboard and stand in the middle of the town? If you can just run the lens, am I okay with this? Would I do this to me? Then you're likely to make a good decision. And I think people somehow have kind of been slightly blindly walking into treating people quite poorly. And I think, as I say, it's done because they're at arm's length, they're at a distance, they're a name on a database rather than someone whose eyeballs they're looking into. And I just think having that pause and that lens where you say, am I all right with this? Would I do this to a human? Then I think, unfortunately, that would stand you apart.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for getting us through the buzz. Now, I move on to one more question. What's the number one piece of advice you'd give to any business owner who wants to be a leader in innovation and in their field?
Write a book.
Write a book, yeah.
Yeah, genuinely, even if they never publish it, it will make their thinking clearer, better, stronger.
Yeah, that's great advice, and comes back to what you said earlier about strengthening the theory, developing the sequence, and refining the ideas from input that you receive when you talk about it.
Absolutely. I think it is, and it is a tour de force. And I think the confidence it gives you with your own ideas is also really important. And if you are someone who then goes on to publish it, I think just that putting yourself out there is a sign of leadership.
All right. Well, thanks, Bryony. This has been really fabulous. Now, where can people reach out to you and find out more about Watertight Marketing and about the book, and perhaps even get in touch to say thank you for what you've shared today?
Well, I'd be delighted to hear from any of you. So if you go to watertightmarketing.com, you'll find all of the links there. If you wanted to chat to me individually, I am mainly on Twitter. That's my social platform of choice. And you will find me at Bryony Thomas, which is Bryony Thomas.
All right. We'll have links to all of those on the show notes, and people can click straight through. Now, finally then, who would you like me to interview on a future InnovaBuzz podcast, and why?
Someone who I think you would enjoy chatting to is a chap called Warren Knight, and his business and book is called Think Digital First. Warren's an international speaker. He's been traveling a lot recently and doing a lot with universities and graduates about helping them to navigate the digital world in a real business setting. So moving away from seeing digital and social as a friendship tool into a business tool. And I think you'd enjoy the conversation with Warren. Okay,
well, we'll get an introduction from you to Warren, and look forward to having a chat with him. So thanks again for sharing your time and your insights with us so generously today on the InnovaBuzz podcast, Bryony. I've really enjoyed this. I've learned a lot, added to my knowledge of my quick holiday read of the Watertight Marketing book, and that's given me some more to work on as I go through the course now. So I wish you all the best for the future, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you ever so much. Thanks, Jürgen. Look forward to listening to more of these sessions. They're great questions.
I hope you enjoyed that informative and thought-provoking conversation with Bryony and took something away from this episode. She shared some wonderful tips about turning the ubiquitous funnel metaphor of marketing on its head and bringing back respect and human relationships to marketing. Also, I loved her approaches to bringing structure to all she does. I'd love to know what you took away from Bryony's episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabiz.co/Bryony Thomas. That is BRYONYTHOMAS, all lowercase, or one word, innovabiz.co/Bryony Thomas. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with Bryony there, as well as links to the Watertight Marketing website, the book, and the other resources we spoke about in today's conversation. Bryony suggested we interview Warren Knight, author of Think Digital First, on a future InnovaBuzz podcast. So Warren, keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Bryony Thomas. Remember to visit innovabiz.co/VIP to access the Transformational Marketing Hub and all its free and exceptionally useful information to help you transform your marketing. Also, check out our Tales of Marketing Transformation show at talesofmarketingtransformation.com, where each episode will provide one valuable message to guide you on your journey of marketing transformation. And of course, tune in again next week, where we've got more fantastic guests lined up in the InnovaBuzz podcast, including leadership evolution coach Anna Swee and George Bryant, Chief Heart Marketing Officer. Stay connected. Subscribe to the InnovaBuzz podcast so you'll make sure you'll never miss another episode. Head on over to innovabiz.co/subscribe. We'd also love you to leave us a review, because what you think matters to us. Take some of the ideas you've heard today and apply them in your business. Any thoughts, ideas, suggestions, or questions, then share them in the comments below the blog post. And remember, if you want to get better marketing results than you ever have, join our fantastic Facebook community at the Tales of Marketing Transformation Facebook group. All you have to do is go to innovabiz.co/TMA. It's free to join. I hope to see you there soon. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBizz. Remember to be awesome and keep innovating.